A bright winter morning stretched across the city's financial district. Glass towers glittered like shards of frozen sunlight, and expensive cars hummed along polished streets as the city's pulse raced ahead of the hour. Amid the wealth and movement, a small figure paused before the towering doors of Silvercrest Bank. Her name was Lila Monroe, and she looked like she had wandered through storms the city had never seen. Dust clung to her cheeks, her clothes were frayed and patched, and her tiny hands clutched a faded bank card like it was the last piece of hope in the world. Inside, the marble floors gleamed under chandeliers that sparkled like captured stars. People in tailored suits and polished shoes moved with precision and purpose, voices mingling with the soft clicks of keyboards and the hum of printers. And there she was, standing in the middle of it all, barely a shadow against the towering walls and gold-trimmed counters. I just want to see my balance," she whispered, her voice small, trembling, and almost lost amid the hum of wealth. Heads turned, some curious, some judging, others suppressing faint laughter. She could feel the weight of their eyes, the unspoken questions. Who let a child like her even in here? Why is she wasting our time? Across the room, Nathaniel Crowe, one of the city's wealthiest and most notoriously unflappable financiers, looked up from his glass desk. He caught sight of her and chuckled, a low, amused sound that carried across the polished floor. A little girl asking to see her balance. This was absurd, almost comical. He leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowed, and smiled. But as she stepped forward, card in hand, something about her hesitant courage made the laughter in the room pause for a heartbeat. A story was about to unfold, a story no one expected. A story that would change everything in ways no one could foresee. The girl's journey had not begun with courage. It had begun with desperation. And today, that desperation would meet an unimaginable truth. Lila Monroe's journey to Silvercrest Bank had not been easy. Orphaned at a young age, she had spent the last few days navigating the city streets with only a handful of coins and the worn bank card her mother had left behind. Her mother had always told her to keep it safe, insisting it was important. One day, Lila had held on to those words, though she had never understood them until today. Her tiny shoes clicked against the icy sidewalks as she passed towering office buildings, their reflective glass windows showing people rushing through lives she had never known. Most passed without a glance. Some sneered, some ignored her entirely. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, but a spark of hope kept her moving. That small card might hold the key to a life she had never dared to imagine. Inside the bank, the air was sharp and polished, scented faintly with money and ambition. Screens flashed numbers and stock tickers at dizzying speed. Workers in crisp suits moved with relentless purpose, carrying files, coffee cups, and the weight of responsibility that came with wealth. Phones rang constantly, voices overlapped, the noise of prosperity filling every corner. At the center of this orchestrated chaos sat Nathaniel Crowe, a man whose reputation for wealth and influence preceded him. He had built his empire through sharp instincts and unwavering confidence, a man used to being untouchable. Nothing about the ordinary world ever rattled him until today. Lila approached the counter, her small fingers trembling as she held out the faded card. The banker behind the desk, a kind-faced woman named Clara Jensen, froze for a brief moment, taken aback by the child's appearance and the courage it took to step into this world so far above her own. Around them, whispers stirred, some curious, some skeptical, and a few impatient. All Lila wanted was simple. She wanted to see if her mother's gift had been real. She wanted to know if the world still held something for her, something that could change her life forever. And as Clara motioned her forward toward the bank's most exclusive terminal, the air seemed to shift. This was the moment where hope and destiny would collide. Lila's small hand clutched the worn card as Clara, Jensen guided her toward Nathaniel Crow's section. Each step felt heavier than the last, not because of the distance, but because of the weight of every gaze that followed her. Whispers filled the room, some questioning, some amused, a few tinged with concern. Why is a child here alone? Is this some kind of scam? But Lila didn't look up. She only focused on the terminal ahead, the place where her uncertain hope would either bloom or vanish. Nathaniel leaned back in his chair, the polished leather creaking softly beneath him. His sharp eyes followed the girl as she approached, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Well, this should be interesting," he muttered to himself, amusement lacing his tone. A little girl asking to see her balance. He almost laughed aloud. Picturing the absurdity of the scene, Clara kneeled beside Lila for a moment, offering a reassuring smile. "It's okay, Lila. Just hand him the card," she whispered. Lila's fingers trembled, but she extended the card toward Nathaniel, her eyes wide and uncertain. The room seemed to hold its breath as Nathaniel's hand hovered over the screen, finally taking the card. For a brief second, the room felt absurdly quiet. Even the clatter of keyboards and the hum of printers seemed to fade, replaced by the soft shuffle of onlookers craning to see what would happen next. Nathaniel inserted the card with a practiced motion, his smirk fading as he glanced down at the screen. The system whirred softly, numbers flickering, and the balance slowly loaded. "Let's see what we have here," he said, still unconsciously smiling, expecting something small, perhaps even negligible. But as the digits appeared, his brow furrowed. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, and leaned closer. Something wasn't right. This wasn't the usual small sum he expected. Clara gasped softly beside him. Advisors peered over their shoulders, curious and confused. Whispers began to ripple through the room, the initial amusement giving way to intrigue. Lila didn't understand the tension around her. She only felt a spark of hope, a tiny flame flickering in her chest. Nathaniel's amusement began to crumble. He tapped the screen, double-checked the numbers, and called over an assistant. "Are these digits correct?" he asked, his voice steady but edged with disbelief. The assistant confirmed, and a silence descended upon the terminal. The numbers were not small. They were monumental. The kind of wealth that could reshape a life entirely. Yet here it was linked to this fragile little girl who had walked in alone. Clutching a faded card, Lila's eyes darted nervously, unsure of what she was seeing in the reactions around her. The banker, the millionaire, the assistant's all eyes were on her, but not with ridicule anymore. Something had shifted. The room had transformed from a place of indifference and wealth into a space charged with suspense, where one child unknowingly held the center of attention. Nathaniel's fingers hovered over the keyboard, and he leaned back slowly, realization dawning. This was no ordinary balance. This was a fortune carefully accumulated, a trust left for someone who had no idea of its existence. And in that moment, the laughter he had intended to share with the room became impossible. The joke was gone, replaced by astonishment. And the first hint of respect. For Lila, the fear in her chest began to mingle with a strange new feeling. Anticipation. Whatever this balance was, it would change everything. And now, the waiting game had begun, the moment where destiny itself seemed to hang on a single screen. A single number, and a single, trembling hand. The numbers on the screen seemed to glow brighter with every passing second, reflecting in Nathaniel Crow's widening eyes. He leaned closer, his usual composure slipping as disbelief took hold. The balance before him wasn't a few hundred or even a few $1,000s, it was life-changing wealth. A fortune that could rival some of his most elite clients. The room seemed to freeze. The hum of printers, the clicking of keyboards, even the distant conversations of bank employees faded into a tense silence. Advisors leaned in, whispers turning to murmurs. Clara Jensen's hand rested gently on Lila's shoulder, grounding her in the chaos she barely understood. Lila's small eyes darted between the screen and the faces around her, sensing that something monumental had just happened. Though she couldn't yet grasp the scale, Nathaniel swallowed hard. His smirk gone, replaced by a rare expression of awe. This can't be right, he muttered, his voice low, almost to himself. He double-checked the account details, re-entered the numbers, even called the system administrator for confirmation. Each time, the digits remained the same. There was no mistake. A hush fell over the room as the full realization settled in. Lila Monroe, the frail girl standing timidly before a room full of wealth and power, was the owner of a trust fund carefully nurtured for years. Every penny, every investment, every financial decision that had been made long ago had built to this single moment. Awaiting her arrival, the assistants exchanged glances. Their astonishment mirrored in Nathaniel's own face. Even seasoned bankers, accustomed to handling immense sums, were rendered speechless. Clara finally found her voice. "Lila, this is incredible," she said softly, crouching to meet the girl's eyes. "Your balance. It's more than anyone could imagine." Lila's lips parted, her fingers gripping the worn card as her mind struggled to comprehend the numbers. Her heart raced, a mixture of fear, disbelief, and something entirely new hope. She had walked into the bank alone, scared and uncertain. But now, the very world that had seemed so cold and unreachable had opened a door she never thought possible. Nathaniel, the man who had laughed at her mere request minutes ago, rose slowly from his chair. His expression had transformed entirely. There was no mockery, no judgment, only a reverent acknowledgement of the magnitude of what lay before him. He had witnessed countless transactions, countless accounts. But none like this a story that transcended numbers, a human miracle hidden in plain sight, as he extended a hand toward Lila. Offering both guidance and protection, the room collectively exhaled. The tension that had gripped every soul in that bank melted into awe. In that single moment, a little girl who had once been invisible became the center of a life-altering revelation. For Lila, the numbers were more than just wealth, they were freedom, security, and the promise of a future she had only dreamed of. And for Nathaniel, for Clara, and for everyone who witnessed it, the lesson was unmistakable. Sometimes, smallest figures hold the greatest power. The climax wasn't just financial, it was deeply human. The room's energy shifted irrevocably, signaling the beginning of a story no one would ever forget. The silence in Silvercrest Bank lingered like a held breath, broken only by the soft shuffle of papers and the quiet gasps of those who had witnessed the revelation. Nathaniel Crowe remained standing, his tall frame slightly hunched as he processed the magnitude of what he had just seen. The laughter that had once bubbled easily from him was gone, replaced by a rare, profound humility. He looked down at Lila Monroe, the small girl clutching her worn card, her wide eyes still reflecting a mixture of fear and confusion. The room had transformed around her. What had been a place of polished floors, glass walls, and cold wealth now felt charged with emotion. Everyone sensed that this was not merely an account balance, it was a life-altering miracle. Clara Jensen gently guided Lila to a chair, whispering reassurances as the girl tried to absorb the enormity of the numbers on the screen. Nathaniel stepped closer, his hands unclasped, an unspoken offer of trust and guidance. For the first time in years, he felt something he rarely allowed himself to acknowledge: genuine empathy around them. Onlookers, bank employees, advisors, and even casual clients began to murmur softly. Many exchanged glances of astonishment, others of admiration. A few, who had laughed moments earlier at the child's presence, now lowered their heads in quiet respect. The shift was subtle but unmistakable, a lesson in humility, kindness, and the unexpected power of human resilience. Nathaniel's voice, calm but steady, broke the tension. "Lila," he began, "I believe someone has taken care of you, even when you couldn't see it." His words were careful, acknowledging the young girl's fear while offering the first hint of safety she had felt in years. Lila's fingers tightened around the card. She wanted to speak, but words failed her. Instead, she allowed herself a small, tentative smile, the first trace of relief and hope creeping across her face. She had come to the bank to see if her mother's gift was real, and now she realized it was more than real. It was transformative. Nathaniel motioned to Clara and a few trusted advisors. "We will ensure she understands everything and that her future is protected. No one should have to face life alone, especially not someone like her." His statement carried weight. It wasn't a promise of charity. It was a pledge of responsibility, of respect, and of recognition of Lila's newfound status, even as the room absorbed the revelation. The focus remained on Lila. She could sense the change not just in Nathaniel, but in everyone around her. Whispers of awe and disbelief floated through the air, mingling with the subtle hum of activity that continued around them. For the first time, Lila felt seen. Truly seen, not as a child to pity, not as a figure of amusement, but as someone whose existence mattered. The rehook had worked. The story shifted from shock to transformation. Lila's life was no longer defined by fear or neglect. And Nathaniel, the man who had once laughed at her request, now stood as a quiet guardian of her newfound destiny. The momentum of change had begun. And nothing in the bank or in Lila's life would ever be the same again. Hope had entered the room. Subtle but undeniable, and with it, the promise that Lila's story was only beginning. Nathaniel Crow took a deep breath and finally pulled out a chair for Lila, his tall frame bending slightly to ensure she was comfortable. The atmosphere in Silvercrest Bank had shifted completely. The earlier whispers of judgment and amusement were replaced by a quiet, reverent energy. Everyone who had observed the interaction could feel that something extraordinary had unfolded, something far beyond mere numbers on a screen. Clara Jensen crouched beside Lila, gently explaining in simple terms what she was seeing. "This isn't just a number, Lila," she said softly. This is a trust fund. Someone believed in you long ago, someone who cared about your family. And now, it's yours." Lila's eyes widened, her small hands trembling slightly as she tried to comprehend the meaning. Her life on the streets, the hunger, the loneliness, all of it had seemed endless, insurmountable. And now, all at once, a door had opened that she had never dared to imagine existed. Nathaniel spoke again, his voice calm but firm. "We'll make sure you understand everything. We'll help you manage this, protect it, and ensure you never have to feel helpless again." The words were heavy with sincerity. For the first time in a long while, Lila felt safe as Clara walked her through the basic steps. Lila's mind raced with possibilities. She thought of a proper place to live, food she wouldn't have to worry about, and the chance to learn and grow without fear. Every worry she had carried seemed to lighten, replaced by a cautious optimism. Nathaniel's own demeanor had softened. He had dealt with vast sums and powerful clients, but he had rarely encountered a moment like this one, where the raw human impact of wealth became undeniable. Here was a life transformed not by ambition or greed, but by foresight, kindness, and the courage of a little girl who dared to step into a world that now suits. "My only lipstick, Ruby Kiss. Ruby Kiss. Only Ruby Kiss. Only Ruby Kiss has the luxurious texture that clad my nice. My Sue's my nice, my nice, my nice kiss. And my nice case, level set. My nice case. And the nice kiss, my nice case, I selled. My nightsy, my nice kiss, my nices, my nighties. My Nike laid. We night size, You see, did I when I say it, had always seemed beyond her reach. Lila looked up at Nathaniel, still holding her card close to her chest. I didn't think anyone cared, she whispered. Nathaniel's expression softened further, a rare vulnerability touching his usually stoic features. Someone did. And now, we're here for you, he replied. Around them, the bank seemed to hold its breath in quiet. The employees, clients, and advisors were witnesses to a profound moment, the intersection of innocence, perseverance, and generosity. It wasn't just a story of money. It was a story of humanity, of hope, and of unexpected miracles. By the time Lila rose from the chair, she walked with a newfound confidence, tentative yet real. She understood that her life had changed irrevocably. And though the numbers on the screen were staggering, the true impact was the promise of safety, dignity, an opportunity. Nathaniel offered a reassuring smile as she prepared to leave the terminal. In that moment, both of them knew something had shifted. A billionaire who had once laughed at a child now recognized the profound responsibility and privilege of being part of her story. And for Lila, the world, once cold and indifferent, now felt warm, welcoming, and full of possibility. The room returned slowly to its regular rhythm, but the energy lingered, a quiet testament to a life forever changed. As Lila clutched the worn card in her small hands, Nathaniel guided her to a private terminal where she could see the details of her inheritance more clearly. The screen displayed a carefully nurtured trust fund, built over years, accumulating interest, investments, and even assets that few in the bank could fully comprehend. It was more than a sum, it was a legacy, a lifeline designed for someone who had no idea it even existed. Nathaniel's eyes never left Lila's face. He had spent decades navigating the world of finance, amassing wealth and power, yet nothing in his experience had prepared him for the emotional gravity of this moment. He realized that this was not about numbers. It was about a life saved, a future rewritten, and a young girl who had dared to hope against all odds. Clara explained the account in simple terms, helping Lila understand the magnitude of what had been left for her. This is more than just money, she said gently. It's security, opportunity, and a chance to make choices you couldn't have before. You can go to school, live somewhere safe, and even help others when you're ready. Lila's lips parted, disbelief and awe mingling in her wide eyes. She had never imagined such a thing could exist for her, not after nights spent cold and hungry, after days of wandering streets where strangers ignored her. And yet, here it was, tangible and real, a miracle that had waited patiently for her to arrive. Around them, the bank staff and advisors continued to watch quietly, their initial curiosity replaced by admiration. Even seasoned professionals, accustomed to handling vast fortunes, found themselves humbled. The room had transformed into a stage for human triumph, where courage, fate, and unseen generosity intersected. Nathaniel finally broke the silence. Lila, I want you to know this isn't just about money. It's about your life, your choices, and your future. We'll help guide you, protect your interests, and ensure you never have to feel powerless again. His tone carried both authority and warmth, rare combination for someone who had always been untouchable. For Lila, the realization hit like a wave. Her mother's card, once a fragile token of hope, was now a key that unlocked freedom, security, and endless possibility. Tears welled in her eyes as a smile, tentative but genuine, spread across her face. She had walked into the bank seeking answers and had found a future that felt alive, full, and finally within her reach. Nathaniel, for the first time that day, allowed himself a quiet moment of reflection. In laughing at the situation, he had underestimated the courage of a child. In witnessing Lila's revelation, he understood that true wealth was not in numbers alone, was in the lives we touch and the hope we preserve. And as Lila's tiny hand rested on the screen, absorbing her new reality, it was clear to everyone in the room. A life had changed forever. And nothing, not even the vast wealth of the bank around them, could diminish the profound power of this moment. The atmosphere in Silvercrest Bank had shifted completely. What had begun as curiosity and judgment had transformed into awe, respect, and quiet admiration. Employees, clients, and advisors who had witnessed Lila's journey now watched as she tentatively explored the details of her inheritance. A little girl who had stepped into a world of unimaginable wealth and emerged as its rightful owner. Lila's eyes, wide with wonder, scanned the figures on the screen. Each number, each account, each asset told a story she had never known, one of generosity, foresight, and a kindness that transcended her immediate understanding. She slowly realized that her life, once defined by hunger and uncertainty, had shifted irrevocably. The walls of the bank no longer felt cold or intimidating. They seemed to echo the possibilities that awaited her. Nathaniel remained close, observing silently but attentively. The amusement that had brought a smirk to his face earlier had vanished completely, replaced by a newfound respect for the resilience and courage of the child standing before him. In guiding Lila through the details of her trust fund, he recognized a rare responsibility, not just as a banker or financier, but as a human being entrusted with a life-altering moment. "Lila," he said gently, kneeling slightly to meet her gaze, "this wealth isn't just numbers. It's a chance to live safely, to learn, and to grow. And when you're ready, you can even help others who need it, just like someone helped your family once." His words carried weight, their sincerity cutting through the tension that had gripped the room around them. The reactions of the bank's patrons shifted subtly but noticeably. A few whispered to one another, inspired by the child's courage. Others, who had previously doubted or laughed, now looked on with a quiet reverence. The energy of the room was no longer transactional. It was deeply human. It was the moment where wealth and kindness intersected, creating ripples that would be felt far beyond the walls of the bank. Lila, slowly absorbing everything, felt a mix of emotions: fear, disbelief, gratitude, and an unfamiliar sense of empowerment. She had walked in with nothing but a worn card and a flicker of hope. Now she held the power to change her life forever. Her trembling hands relaxed slightly as she realized that she was not alone. She had Clara by her side, Nathaniel watching over her, and the invisible support of someone who had believed in her long before she could comprehend it. The rehook had worked. The story had shifted once more from shock and astonishment to understanding and transformation. Lila's world, once confined to hunger and uncertainty, now expanded before her like the sun rising over a dark horizon. And in that moment, Nathaniel too felt something he rarely allowed himself to feel: a quiet, humbled joy. He had laughed at her request, underestimating the courage of a child. Now, he watched her begin to step into her own power, and in doing so, he recognized the true magnitude of human resilience. The lesson was clear. Sometimes, those who seem weakest hold the greatest strength, and those who seem smallest carry the biggest surprises. As Lila smiled softly, the room seemed to pulse with possibility. A quiet promise that her story had only just begun. Lila sat quietly for a moment, letting the magnitude of her inheritance settle in. Each number on the screen, each account and investment, was no longer an abstract concept, was a tangible promise of safety, opportunity, and freedom. She pressed her small hands together, taking a deep breath, slowly realizing that the world she had once feared was no longer as frightening as it had seemed. Nathaniel stood beside her, his posture now calm and reassuring. "Lila," he said gently, "we'll make sure you understand everything. You don't have to face this alone." His voice carried authority, but also warmth, the rare combination that instilled both confidence and comfort. Clara nodded, offering a soft smile and resting a protective hand on Lila's shoulder. The girl's thoughts drifted to her mother's words, the importance of the card. The hope she had instilled without knowing if it would ever be realized. Lila's heart swelled with gratitude and a sense of wonder. The world she had wandered so fearfully, the city streets that had seemed endless and unforgiving, now felt alive with possibility. For the first time in her life, she felt in control, not merely surviving, but poised to thrive. Nathaniel guided her through the basic details of her trust fund, explaining the purpose, the protections, and the opportunities it provided. Clara added simple explanations, ensuring Lila could understand the practical steps without feeling overwhelmed. Each explanation was met with awe and growing comprehension, and a smile began to settle permanently on Lila's face. Around them, the bank seemed to adjust to the transformation that had occurred. The staff who had watched in disbelief now moved with quiet respect. A few patrons, previously indifferent, paused to exchange glances. Inspired by the courage and resilience of a little girl who had turned the tables on fate, the room itself seemed infused with a sense of hope and possibility. Nathaniel stepped back, observing Lila as she absorbed her new reality. The boyish spark of uncertainty in her eyes was giving way to a subtle determination. He realized that his role was no longer about numbers or transactions. It was about supporting the growth of someone whose life had been altered in an instant. Lila looked up at Nathaniel and Clara, her voice barely above a whisper, but full of wonder. "I didn't think anyone cared." Nathaniel's expression softened, and he nodded. "Someone did," he replied quietly. "And now, we'll make sure you never feel alone again." By the time Lila rose from her chair, she carried herself differently. Each step was tentative but purposeful, the invisible weight of fear lifting with every motion. She understood that the numbers on the screen were more than wealth. They were the keys to a life she had never dared to imagine. A life she now had the chance to shape. The bank returned slowly to its routine, but the energy lingered. Lila had walked in as a frightened, desperate child and was leaving as a young girl with newfound security, confidence, and hope. And for Nathaniel, for Clara, and for everyone who had witnessed it, the lesson was undeniable. Sometimes the most profound transformations come from the smallest acts of courage and the unseen gifts left behind by those who love us. Lila Monroe's journey had reached a turning point, but it was just the beginning of a life redefined by opportunity, compassion, and the extraordinary power of hope. The murmurs in Silvercrest Bank lingered long after Lila stepped away from the terminal. What had been an ordinary day of transactions and meetings had transformed into a moment of awe and inspiration. Bank employees exchanged glances, many shaking their heads in disbelief, some smiling quietly at the reminder that life could surprise even the most jaded hearts. Nathaniel Crow watched Lila carefully, ensuring that she felt safe as the bank staff began to return to their routines. The tension that had gripped the room earlier had given way to a collective recognition. They had just witnessed a rare miracle unfold. Lila, a small, fragile girl, had unknowingly stepped into a life-altering fortune, and with it, she carried the possibility to reshape her entire future. Clara Jensen guided Lila to the exit, explaining gently what would happen next. Guardians would be arranged, advisors assigned, and every aspect of her trust fund carefully managed until she was ready to make decisions for herself. Lila nodded, her fingers still clutching the worn card, a symbol of hope and love left behind by her mother. The journey that had begun with desperation now shimmered with promise. Outside, sun poured over the city streets, golden and warm. Lila paused, tilting her head to take in the scene: the tall buildings, the bustling crowds, the world she had always felt apart from. But today, it felt different. Today, the world was open, welcoming, and filled with possibility. Nathaniel stepped beside her, his usual composure softened. "The world can be harsh," he said quietly, "but it can also be generous. Sometimes the smallest acts, the quietest hopes, lead to the greatest change." Lila's lips curved into a small, genuine smile. For the first time in years, she felt safe, seen, and valued. As she walked away from the bank, Lila carried more than wealth. She carried the knowledge that she was not alone, that courage mattered, and that miracles, hidden or forgotten, could appear when least expected. She glanced at the card in her hand one last time and whispered a quiet thank you to her mother, a connection that had guided her through every hardship. Back inside, Nathaniel returned to his office, reflecting on the day's events. He had laughed at a child, underestimated courage, and in doing so, learned a profound truth. True wealth lies not in numbers alone, but in the lives we touch and the hope we preserve. The encounter had changed him, leaving him humbled, reflective, and quietly inspired. Around the city, those who had glimpsed the story, employees, clients, even passers-by who overheard whispers, would carry it forward. A child's bravery, a mother's foresight, and the kindness of strangers had created a tale that transcended wealth. It was a reminder that the human heart, in its resilience and hope, could create miracles even in the unlikeliest of places. Lila walked toward the horizon of the city, sunlight glinting off her hair and catching her eyes, which now held both wonder and determination. The world, once cold and intimidating, had opened its doors, offering her possibility, dignity, and the chance to shape her own story. Every step forward was no longer tentative. It was confident, each one echoing the promise of a future defined not by fear or scarcity, but by hope, security, and opportunity. She glanced back once, seeing the bank behind her, and felt a quiet gratitude to those who had guided her, to the unseen hand of her mother, and to the miracles that had led her to this day. The city's hum, once overwhelming, now felt like music, a rhythm that matched her newfound sense of purpose. And so, Lila Monroe moved forward into the sunlight, carrying with her not just wealth, but the extraordinary power of courage, hope, and unexpected kindness. A story that would inspire anyone who ever dared to believe that life could surprise them. When they least expected it, the world was still vast, still unpredictable, but for the first time, it felt like it belonged to her.